Hello, and a big welcome to you all here this evening for our webinar, Your Teen and Their Sleep. Everyone needs sleep, especially teenagers, yet they may find it very difficult to get the sleep that they need. In today's world, there are many distractions that prevent teens from getting sleep, and sometimes they're fighting against big industry. And did you know that Netflix highlighted sleep as its biggest competitor? We know from the young people that contact Childline Listening Service that sleep is an issue among this age group. And we also know from the parents that contact our parenting services that they're also struggling with this issue for their teens. My name is Neve Clark, and I'm a Community Engagement Manager with responsibility for the Smart Moves programme with the ISPCC. And also joining me on the webinar is my colleague Siobhan Harvey, Parenting Lead, and Madeleine Connolly, Family Psychotherapist and Senior Psychiatric Social Worker, who specialises in parenting and adolescent mental health and wellbeing. Thanks for taking the time out and being with us here this evening. And in a moment, I'll talk a little bit more about the ISPCC services and programmes on offer. And then Madeleine will focus on sleep, as well as talking about some tips and tools on how to manage it. So first of all, we have a little bit of housekeeping to get through. You may have noticed that all participants have automatically been placed on mute and your cameras are off. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so if you have any questions during the webinar, you can send them in using the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get it to as many questions as possible. If we don't answer your questions, please feel free to contact us afterwards for more information, and all contact details will be shown at the end of the webinar. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on ISPCC digital platforms. So for ISPCC services, we have our Childline Listening Service, which is our 24-hour, 7 days a week service. And this is available to children and young people up to and including 18 years of age. And this is done through our phone and online chat service. We also have our Ask the Teen service for children and young people, where you can ask a question about anything you want and there's nothing too big or too small. In some areas, we have our Childline Therapeutic Support Service, which provides children and young people and families with therapeutic support service. And we can meet children and young people where they're most comfortable, whether that's online, in their home, at a local community centre or at school. And we have this service various locations, so you do need to contact the ISPCC to find out if this is available in your area. Our Smart Moves School Transition Programme, which aims to support the emotional resilience of children as they prepare to transition from primary to secondary school, is also available. And our Shield is our anti-bullying programme, which aims to support any organisation that works with young people in their efforts to proactively manage bullying. We have our digital mental health and wellbeing programmes, which aim to reduce anxiety for children and young people, and digital programmes for parents and carers around managing their own anxiety while supporting their anxious teen or child. We also have our Parenting Hub, and on this, this is where our ISPCC website publishes articles in relation to parenting and parenting support on a range of topics. And we have our Digital Ready Hub, which is a trusted destination for information on how you can support children and young people to have positive experiences online. We have video content there from cyber psychologist experts, the Garda Online Exploration Unit, clinical psychologists, principals, parents, and young people themselves. We have our support line, which is a listening service offering information, advice, and emotional support to parents and carers. And this is open between 9 and 1, Monday to Friday, and it can be contacted by calling 01 522 4300. And our Ask Robin is a service for parents where you can ask us a question on anything to do with parenting. And finally, we're delighted to say that Vodafone Ireland Foundation has partnered with DCU Anti-Bullying Centre and Childline by ISPCC to develop and launch Tozy. And this is a new app which is aimed at creating a safer, more positive online space for young people. This app is free to download and it's available on iOS and Android. And the aim of the app is to educate, empower, support young people with the tools and advice they need to have a more positive online experience delivered through engaging features within the app. So for any more information on any of these services, please log on to www.ispcc.ie. So now I'd like to introduce Madeleine Connolly. Madeleine is a senior psychiatric social worker and systematic family therapist, and she has worked in CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, for 20 years. She's experienced supporting parents and carers responding to child-to-parent conflict, violence and aggression. threats of self or of harm to self and to others, and anxiety. She's extensive experience in working with neurodivergent individuals and families. In addition to working with individuals and families, Madeleine delivers training in nonviolent resistance to service providers. She's co authored an NVR Parent Carer Handbook for Parentline and is a member of the NVR Ireland Committee, a network of practitioners and researchers. Madeleine teaches on the Masters of Systematic Psychotherapy training programme in the School of Medicine in UCD, and she's co authored a chapter for Family Therapy Conversations for Change. So, Madeleine, we're absolutely delighted to have you joining us here this evening. Welcome.
Thanks so much, and thanks for that lovely introduction. And a very big welcome to all of you here this evening and making the time in between probably bedtimes to sit with us here this evening and to have the conversation about teens and sleep. And judging by the numbers of people who are have signed up for this webinar, it's clearly a very, very important issue that we talk about and a very concerning issue for a lot of parents. So you're all very welcome. I know that you all know here how important sleep is, and that's not the issue for us tonight. The issue is how we can share that message with our teens and with young people, and how we can do it in a way that will actually help them to make changes to their own sleep patterns. So tonight, really, my aim is to introduce also the concept of connection before correction. And I suppose by talking about this theme of connecting with your child, I'm hoping that it will help you to create some structure around evening times and night times in order to provide stability for your teens in relation to their sleep habits. And this is at a time of their life when they have so many new experience and demands pulling them in every direction. And children often find comfort in predictable events. And so we're going to look at some ideas you can try to try and restore nighttime habits, to reduce stress at nighttime, and to work gradually with your teen, hopefully on board, towards better rest and sleep routines, while also maintaining the relationship you want to have with your teen, opening up the communication between yourselves and your teen, and hopefully, therefore, increasing the likelihood of cooperation by addressing this issue of their sleep coming from a place of connection, empathy, and warmth. Connection before correction also defers to connecting authority. So we know that parents very often struggle with putting in boundaries. Their support and love and connection with their child is often in some ways easier to work on, but the role of parental responsibility in responding to your child's needs can often be trickier, especially at this age when young people have their own ideas about what's good for them and what's not good for them. So, really, it's the connecting authority, and the authority bit is how to put in those limits and boundaries in a way that because you know what's best for your child at certain points of their lives. So I'm hoping to help you with that so you can show some leadership in this regard with your children. And influence rather than control is the theme of this evening because we're talking about teens, and therefore your influence might be more important than actually trying to control what they do. And to try and connect with what's going on for you first. What is my worry about this? Why am I so worried? Should I be so worried about this? And also to connect with your teen and the impact, trying to get through to them on the impact of their sleep habits. So I hope you get some tips to take away this evening. As I said, sleep is a much talked about subject in the literature. There was no trouble getting research around this area for tonight's talk, particularly the age group of 12 to 17. Because just like the preschool years are a time of rapid growth and learning, so too are these teenage years. There's so much going on for young people, biological changes, social changes, emotional changes, and cognitive developments happening for them all at the same time. So we'll talk about the issues related to sleep disturbance and also issues for adolescents in general that we know about in terms of their mental health and mental well-being. So sleep really does become center stage at this point of their lives, and it becomes center stage for you as parents because you're trying to do the best for them and get your young people to sleep better. And with everything that's happening so intensely in a relatively short period of years, some people are referring to this as the perfect storm, with everything happening at once, describing how a teen is primed for upset almost. It's very easy. Some of these young people are very emotionally, um, labile is the word, but they can get very emotional very quickly. And it's a difficult time for them and a difficult time to parents sometimes. But if they would allow sleep to happen, it might offset some of the challenges they're facing and allow the battery to be recharged in the nighttime hours. And if it doesn't happen consistently, regular sleep cycles, then the conditions are sort of ripe for their vulnerabilities to come to the fore, for them to be irritable, to have, to struggle with their mood, to become withdrawn. So it really is an important issue that we're talking about this evening. So as I said, I hope you get some good information from tonight, or at least a few tips, and the bottom slides will have some tips to try. This has also been recorded, so you don't have to feel you have to take all the information in as we talk tonight. Try and sit back and enjoy it a little bit and just take the information in, because you can always go back for the detail at a later time when you have more time and space to do that. So there might have been a day when you were able to say night night, sleep tight, and know that your young person was going to be in their own bed for the night, or certainly under your own roof for the night. They might have traveled a bit into a parent's bed, or they might have had nightmares occasionally. But generally, once they were asleep and once their head hit the pillow, you might have been fairly confident that they would have a good night's sleep to help them with the next day. But as teens and the onset of the teen years, they don't fall asleep even before you sometimes. So it is more difficult to get these patterns and more challenge into their lives. And definitely there are more challenges for them to face when it comes to sleep. There's a lot more going on for them, even at night when their head hits the pillow. So we're not saying it's an easy solution here, and it definitely isn't. So as I said, there's lots of changes taking place for teenagers, in their bodies, in their friendship groups, in the challenges that they're facing in the outside world. Many teens put themselves under pressure. It's not often parents putting them under pressure. They set their own standards for themselves, and sometimes they become too much for them. They want to do well at everything or please people, and that can be pretty exhausting. But in the physical changes, naturally they want later bedtimes. Their bodies are getting tired later. Their body clock wants to sleep in late and stay up late, and that's a natural thing that's happening for your child in their body. Of course, they might want more privacy. They're exploring their independence. And quite often they can be critical of parents, and sometimes in a healthy way. They're questioning, they're trying to find their place in the world, they're trying to figure out what's right for them. So, a sort of a healthy challenge is okay, but it makes it harder for you, doesn't it, to get that message across that you know what's best in terms of their sleep. And as I said, they're quite emotionally sensitive and sometimes explosive at this age. So it's difficult for them often to express how they feel. And quite often a teen will say, nobody really gets it. They don't know what's going on for me. They may often feel restricted by parental sort of controls and authority, and sleep might be one of the things that they try to take control of themselves. But look, it's not all bad for teens. I mean, there's lots of fantastic, exciting things going on in their lives as well, I hope. And quite often they're great company, and there's lots of funny stories about your teens, and they're growing into personalities, and it's a fantastic time in their lives, and hopefully for you as parents at times as well. But you are trying to promote their competence, you're trying to support their maturity, and you're trying to help support them with their mental health. And that's what you're trying to do as a parent, and communicate with them around these things. So let's see if we can come up with any ideas that might help you with that. So, quite often at this stage as well, we'll talk about the teenage years from 12 to 17, and then young adulthood is more the 18 to 25. And it's all a period of great growth and development, and hopefully interest and motivation in becoming adults and wanting being motivated about life. Obviously, sleep is going to interfere with this, or bad sleep habits. And we know young people are kind of at a stage where they want to make their own mistakes. And if they can do this in a supportive environment, that's really helpful for them. Of course, there are the other factors like smartphones, screens before sleep, homework schedules, part-time work hours, often worry about the future, which is a surprising thing that I quite often come across with teens. They do worry about their future, even though it may seem like they don't. And they really do appreciate their relationships with their friends and family. And it really hits them hard when these aren't going well quite often. They don't want to be fighting with their parents or their siblings. And it can be very difficult for these young people when all of this is going on for them. So, anxiety and other mental health issues are often linked to sleep habits. So, that's why we're talking about this tonight. We know that every individual has a unique requirement for sleep duration, and that's dictated to in some ways by age, genetics, obviously lifestyle, and also, as I said, that the physical changes that are happening with their natural body's clock and their 24-hour cycle. And poor nighttime routines and lack of sleep at this sensitive developmental period is really an issue that we have to address and address well if we can, in a supportive way. There are a lot of studies on this issue, and I put some references at the end, but I'm not going to go into the detail of those studies because I just wouldn't have time tonight to talk about the evidence around this work. Maybe you've tried lots of ways to communicate this important message of their need to sleep. Maybe you've tried bargaining, maybe you've tried cajoling, maybe you've tried begging them, maybe you've tried insisting, maybe you've threatened, maybe you've pulled the duvet off the bed. These are all the stories that I hear from parents. Maybe you've turned off the Wi-Fi. I'm sure you've done one or all of those things in desperation at some point of your life. And maybe tonight is about looking at getting a different message just to try it if you feel you've tried everything else. So what we might do now is change tack or help you change tack and, declare peace. I'm not going to have those fights anymore, but I'm going to persist with the message in a different way. It's really hard for a parent to contain their frustration and upset and sometimes anger when they know the logical solution is that if you only you'd get a better night's sleep, you wouldn't be so irritable in the morning, you wouldn't be so hard to get out of bed, you wouldn't be missing school. It's quite a frustrating position for a parent, for a wise parent to be in. And quite often you find yourself saying, you're just tired, you need to go to bed earlier, put the books away now, get off your phone, take a break, get some sleep. So I'm sure you've tried all of these strategies and more in trying to get your young person to sort of see the sense that if they got to bed earlier, had better nighttime routines, they might feel better and be able to do better in their sports, recreation, in their studies, and everything that might be important to them. So I'm going to suggest that that you connect with your young person and use the end of the day as a time to wind down, to be present and to connect with your young person. So that's what the different message I'm trying to get across this evening is what is in your power to do in terms of getting the message across. And quite often a young person, when they feel the time is right, might actually take your advice. Um, and let's hope they do at some point. So we know why sleep matters. As I said, every one of you here are here because you probably know the importance of sleep and are struggling with this in your house and with the routines. So, and we know that there is a causal link to increased mental health difficulties in these age groups. We also know that some young people are early birds, others are night owls. So we have to figure out what's going to work. You have to figure out what's going to work in your house and for your child, for your teenager. There's no quick fix, there's no one way with this. It's very much a matter of you figuring out what's going to work in this house. Nobody can tell you what to do or how to do it. It's about feeling your way through, but hopefully with your young person and really taking the fight out of it, which is what I'm trying to get the message across about today. No argument is ever sorted in an argument. So I'm trying to help you to connect, calm down yourselves, then connect and then have the conversation. So that's really the key message I'm trying to get across this evening. And there are plenty of resources there. That's a lovely piece there from the Sleep Hub, which any of you can Google. They're free resources and they're there for you for when you need them. So, what are we seeing in terms of sleep disturbance? We're seeing teens, I'm certainly seeing teens who are saying they struggle with falling asleep. Then some would say they're struggling with staying asleep. Some of them would say they don't have enough time to sleep. They've got very busy schedules. And then poor sleep quality is something else that young people complain of. Nightmares are still a part of this part of their lives. Sleep disorders and insomnia might be something that they need to go and get help with. And some young people say they suffer from sleep paralysis. So some of these things would require you to go and get more expert help with these difficulties if they're there. But all of these are common in adolescents and young adults, with only a small proportion, and that's verified in the research, getting the recommended minimum of 8 hours. And that's internationally a problem as well. So let's go with that bar of teens needing between 8 and 10 hours sleep a night. And we can see there from those pieces of the research I pulled out that it almost never happens that teens get even the minimum 8 hours from according to the research. And as I said, it's very much a unique requirement for your child. But a lack of sleep and the poor nighttime routines are the thing that we're trying to address here. So, what are the barriers to a good night's sleep? And there are some that young people are saying. So, the natural sleep cycle changes for teens is something that is going on for them in their bodies. They are getting tired later. The melatonin that they produce for sleep onset is being produced later at night, and there are obviously challenges to this melatonin, which we'll talk about. They really they are, there's a shift. This shift is really significant, and you can see from the research that while we do need to talk about all the other external influences like phones and social media and screens, the natural shift in their cycle is making also part of what's making them out of sync with the time that somebody wants them to go to bed. So when we say an appropriate hour, there's an appropriate hour because of the demands they have to meet the next day. Obviously, teens love to have lengthy lie-ins at the weekends, and that's suiting their body clock very well if they can. So I've just done a little diagram here of my conversations with some of the young people that I have seen. So school day starts early for teens. They might not get enough sleep, and then they're becoming overtired in school. They're not getting the consistent sleep times and wake up times to help their body cope with the early mornings. After a night's sleep, they can feel fully recharged if they get an uninterrupted night's sleep. The battery depletes during the day as it progresses, and quite often they might feel like taking a nap during the day. Now, I've looked at this business of taking a nap during the day, and sometimes an early short nap, if it's needed, can be recommended. But later and longer naps later in the day are obviously then going to interfere with the same sleep cycle. So other young people would say, my head has hit the pillow. I can't fall asleep. My mind just starts to work then. What if I can't sleep? And then I get upset because I can't sleep because I'm worrying about school tomorrow. And then this repetitive negative thinking pattern comes into their mind. And then they start thinking, why did I say that? What did I say? I shouldn't have said that. They start worrying about processing what's happened to them during the day, and then they start to get quite upset about that. So the head hitting the pillow doesn't signify that even when they've tried that they can actually the sleep will come and come to them. So this sleep pressure and an out of balance body clock is really difficult for them, and can set off this repetitive negative thinking that's happening for these young people. So we know now we're looking for a good night's sleep in what some people call the perfect storm of ingredients, let's call them. So this biological and psychological storm, I read somewhere in the literature, I read that it steals their slumber. So we know what a good night's sleep is. So they're saying, for 14 to 17-year-olds, 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep every night is what's recommended. So we need to think, about what would a good sleep schedule look like. I'm in favor now of thinking of it as a nighttime period of the day where you can introduce some kind of a household pattern where there's a wind down time, lights are dimmed, there's a supper time maybe introduced, there's a chat, a check-in, and that you can lead by example in terms of your use of social media. Even the TV volume will be turned down. So that's one of the things that we can think about. And maybe think now, what are your common points of conflict for you with your teenagers? Have a think about how that is as I talk. Where do I actually, butt heads with my kid? Where do we lock horns? What's the common point of conflict? And have a little think about that. I'm going to throw this question at you to make sure you're all awake. What Netflix biggest competitor is? And one of you can put it in the chat and we'll see who gets it right. There's no prizes, I'm afraid, because I didn't organize any. So let's look at what are the key factors. We've looked at the biological factors, and some of the researchers are saying don't blame TikTok, it's the body clock. I'm guessing it's both and here. But from the course of childhood through to their adolescence, there's a delay in our body clock or our circadian rhythm. You've probably read about that timing. So the body clock drifts later. So the stormy teenager might have tried to reduce technology. They might have tried the phone out of the bedroom, and they're still lying there in the dark and can't go back asleep. And that's a struggle for many teenagers. And during their teenage years, I suppose, they might experience a sleep phase delay, which is a shift in this rhythm. And when they were younger, they would have had earlier bedtime. So it was easier for you as parents. 8 or 9 might have been when they might have been tired. But they mightn't get tired now until much later. Their melatonin level may not rise until around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. And as they're going to bed later, they need to sleep later in the morning. And we know that they still need the 10 hours sleep. Either way, they need 10 hours sleep. So I don't know how, it's very difficult to get the formula right, isn't there? Isn't it? I mean, if they didn't have the demands of the next day, there probably will be a lot less problem with bedtimes in people's houses. But they say setting a bedtime, a specific time around which they might start their bedtime routine and sticking to it at the same time every day and being regular with that can help to train their body and their rhythm and help their brain to understand this is the time to sleep and this is the time to wake up. Now, I think you could negotiate what that time is, because for some people going later is helpful because they'll fall asleep quicker. And for others, they figure out what is a good time for me. When am I irritable if I get less than so many hours sleep a night? So that's something you've got to kind of negotiate and talk to your young person about, is how do we just set a rhythm here, a regular rhythm? And the time can be negotiable in terms of going to sleep. Daily routine plays a large role in the quality of sleep at night. And obviously having activities, meals, workouts, socializing can provide a sense of regularity as well that fosters better sleep. So if you can build a schedule for yourself, your cycle can work, your sleep-wake cycle can then work its way around that. So as I said in the research, some researchers are saying that they've tried this technology and they can't go back asleep, and that this body clock, this natural body clock, is also interfering with it. So this will result in later teen bedtimes. And certainly some apps are more responsible than others to keep teens scrolling at night long into the evening. And this sleep pressure and the added external pressure of being on phones or feeling they need to check things or check in with their friends even after a busy day is also adding to the difficulties here. And how do you schedule a sort of a daily routine that can allow for them to get all of that in if they want to, all of the things that they feel they need to do? We depend on light in the morning and darkness at night to help the body's clock continue turning on schedule, and to regulate the body's processes. So when it gets dark outside, the absence of light sends a signal to the brain that it's time to start the sleep cycle. And then the brain interprets darkness as a message saying there's no need to stay awake and alert. This is bedtime, and I won't go into the science of it because I'd probably get it would take too much time. So the melatonin is the hormone that's being released. And this is essential for the sleep-wake cycle. And there are interfering factors interfering with this. And one of them is screens at night, and certainly screens close to their face late at night after dark is certainly not helping sleep onset. But let's listen to this really interesting podcast that I came across. I'm hoping the technology would work. It worked for us earlier, and if somebody could say whether it's actually working or not, that'd be great. So I can't see anyone, so I don't know if the sound is working. Can you hear it?
No, Madeleine, we can't.
No?
No.
Okay, let me just start again. I did share sound. Okay, try again. Can you hear it now?
Here are your hosts, Dr. David Cunnington and Dr. Moira Younger.
So welcome to episode 51 of Sleep Talk, podcast talking all things sleep. And welcome again, Moira.
Hello, Dave. Hello, everyone.
So the topic for this month's podcast is sleep in teenagers. In Australia this month, start of February, everyone's back at school, and it's often we're in the clinic, we're getting the urgent phone call. How the heck am I going to get my teenager out of bed and to school?
For 8 o'clock or earlier. Yeah, because they've had the luxury of just, letting themselves be as delayed as possible, perhaps, with their habits and sleeping in. Great time to discuss this.
So we'll come back to that, but Moira, time to put the pressure on. How's your preparations going for World Sleep Day?
Yes, well, soon it's coming up, March 13th in Australia. Well, in fact, it's international, isn't it? It's World Sleep Day is the same day for all of us. And the theme this year is better sleep, better life, better planet. So that's going to be how broad can you go with that? I think it covers everything. But I love that. I think, well, the sky's the limit. It actually is going to be, we can make what we want of that in terms of you can bring in environmental issues, you can bring in mental health issues, a whole stuff, a whole lot of stuff that we'll be focusing on. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I think once again, it's a big opportunity to get some media attention and not just for the attention, but to have a platform to talk about perhaps some solutions and give people some relief, and trying not to catastrophize too much. Let's trying to just say, look, sleep's super important. Yes, that's the message, but let's be really sensible, have a really sensible approach about it. Don't get too panicky and anxious about it.
So I really wanted to get that bit in of not getting too panicky about it. And then I'm just going to go to a little clinical tip here.
So, Dave, what's your clinical tip for this month?
So my clinical tip, which is pretty tough, following Margot, who's really an expert in this area, and I really do defer to her.
It's fabulous.
Is when working with adolescents, I've really generally found that I get the best results if I can get the adolescent on board.
Yeah, absolutely.
And often that's hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes sort of almost sidelining the parent and sort of playing a bit sort of, bad guy to the parent and good guy to the adolescent to create that sort of relationship. And then you've got to rebuild the relationship with the parent as well, or just even getting the parent sort of out of the room so you can talk to the adolescent directly.
Yeah.
But particularly with the stuff I want to do when I'm managing sleep, and people who listen to the podcast will know a lot of sleep management from my point of view is psychoeducation.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if I can just get a teenager or an adolescent to understand how sleep works, they're not silly.
Yeah.
They'll know, okay, that's what I need to do. I'm going to choose when I put that into place and when I'm actually going to implement it.
Yeah.
But thanks. I've got the tools I need now.
Yeah. I'm barging on your clinical tip here. But I just wonder about the role of just their own subjective feelings of impairment or distress is really key here. Because sometimes it's just absolutely fine, but it's caused a lot of angst in the family but the kid themselves or the teenagers, they're actually not too bad in sometimes.
Yeah.
So that can be a mediating factor, I think, in your approach to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we got into a little bit with Margot, is that there can be this dynamic with the parent wanting it to the adolescent's sleep to fit a certain pattern, and the adolescent to approach it in a certain way based on the parent's own beliefs about sleep.
Yep.
So that's where the education piece comes in. So if both parties can get that education and then confidently leave the adolescent to manage it, I think that's a good place to start.
So that's helpful, isn't it, to listen to other experts talking about this issue? And I'm not sure how I felt about the parent being sidelined, as he suggested, but I think they also came back around to two things. One, that the child or the young person needs some education, and maybe it's not always that they need to hear it from their parent. You know yourself, sometimes your teen will listen to another source, even if it's the same information you've been giving them, a lot easier. Sometimes it's a coach or a teacher or a relative they get on with that might also try and reinforce the message you're trying to give them, that they might hear it from them differently, if that makes any sense. So as you can see, you can go into those podcasts, and they're really good, and they're based on very good research. So I have no problem recommending them. So one of the ways of appealing to your young person is to, when you're talking about the benefits of sleep, is how good it is for you. You know, that going to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every morning is really important. It's important for your healthier hair, healthier bones, healthier brain development. You know, you can appeal to them in terms of their sports, you know, and say you'll be making better decisions on the pitch, or you'll be able to play better. You might manage the roller coaster of emotions that are happening, are more likely to happen if you've good sleep hygiene. Um, Interestingly, in the literature as well, there was a piece that I caught on to, saying that the decline in sleep duration, so that's the amount of time that somebody sleeps at in one given period, was noted in the 2010s, linked to the habits of social media and scrolling. Now, I'm not going to go down the road of saying that social media is the enemy here. I think we have to be look at all sides and the benefits and the need to exercise a lot of caution and, I suppose, monitoring around social media as well. We could have a whole night talking about that. But what we do know is that real world interactions are so important for physical and social and emotional development. So real off screen interactions are really so important. And we see that more and more in terms of what experts are advising. And we all obviously know that exercise, even if it's movement, is important too for our overall health and sleep quality. And we're not talking about running marathons here. We're talking about fresh air and 15, 20 minutes exercise a day. People don't have to feel under pressure to be joining gyms or any of that. So how can we create, I suppose, how can we help our young people to flourish in the digital age, because they're citizens of a digital age, while also getting the balance that they need for real world interactions and what's best for their health, their overall health. So the benefits of sleep, again, I won't read through all the slides that I have, because you can go back and see them. But we do need to understand that the pressure on young people to be on social media platforms, while also we recognize the effects on focus and concentration and sleep duration and quality. We also need to understand the reality of nightmares, insomnia, sleep paralysis, sleep disturbance that our young people are having. And we need to get as many resources as we can around these issues as early as possible, so that you can help and support your young person to deal with the things that might need extra help and extra resources out there. So I suppose, how do we get the message across? You know, we know that this is teenage brains are constantly being built. You know, the construction of them is made on the foundation of positive communication and close connected relationships. And really, that's the key, isn't it? That they are learning from how we advise and help and support them. They can't be expected to think and behave like adults. You know, they're more likely to be reactive and react on instinct rather than process information. So I suppose it's about us as parents standing back and understanding that that's what's happening for them as well, and that they're not going to see sense, in inverted commas, our sense, the way we see it, because that's not that's not what their bodies are telling them, and that's maybe not, they mightn't actually fully feel that they should be on board with what we think as parents. Their communication and judgment skills in this area are still developing, and we need to be supportive and understanding of this as parents. And young people experience intense emotions, and there's evidence to show and support this. And when emotions are heightened, particularly at bedtimes or particularly in morning times and trying to get people out to school and trying to get to work, the capacity to think where there's a lot of stress and a lot of heightened emotions and to understand and process what's going on is very reduced, because people get so emotionally, I suppose, upset and distressed that you can't really reach your rational brain at those times, neither parent or teen at those points. And this is where a lot of the conflict and the locking horns happens between parent and young person. We can understand why it happens. Everybody's under pressure in those times of the day, but we need to really try and take the lead in this to lead the young person towards better sleep times, to be the leader in it, if you like, and to take leadership position as parents, because we are the ones who can press our pause button, think about things in a more rational and planned way, and then present it to the young person, and validating their emotional state can make a big difference when they're upset. So I suppose quite often parents will say, I'm either giving out and authoritative and saying, you just have to do this, or else I'm swinging to the other side and saying, oh, it's too much for him. He can't do it. Leave him alone. You're too hard on him. And parents will often say we swing between one or the other, and one of us is in one position and one of us is in the other position many times a day. So what we want to look at now is, how do you get into a middle ground here? What's going to be support? What's your support position as a parent, rather than swinging between being very demanding and authoritarian, or very laissez-faire and kind of protective almost, or overprotective? How do we get into a support position with this issue, a supportive stance, particularly around sleep? So in middle childhood and adolescence, the child is broadening his or her field of exploration. They're becoming exposed to new risks, and therefore as parents, you're nearly stepping more into position as a parent. And the link between your authority, which is what's required. Now, I would always qualify authority with connective authority, respectful, kind, but sure, if you like, making decisions when you need to on behalf of your child, because it's your responsibility to know what they need at times. And the creation of this secure parent-child bond is always there as well, and it's relevant. So it's like you're trying to get both at this time in their lives. You're trying to be sensitive and available, but also take an authoritative stand where you need to, particularly during these years. And some of the helpful way to see it is providing structure, being more present, stepping into your role more as a parent at a time when your child is probably pushing you away and naturally wants to do things on their own, or for you not to interfere. So your parental presence, I'll explain what I mean by that, and stepping into that more at this time. Social support or other supports are so important to our parenting role. And then your own self-control, staying in charge of yourself in the face of your child not being able to control their emotions or take charge of them. So one of the things to take away tonight is the delay principle. Because if you're stressed, which most parents are, first thing in the morning and last thing at night, this can lead to short-term thinking. It can be difficult to plan. It can be difficult to have the response you want to have. So if you can reduce those stresses, you can increase your planning and be more strategic in your response. But I say it's a pause button. It's not a delete button. You can come back to it. And that's the delay principle. So instead of being impulsive and reactive and saying things that you're sorry about later, you're trying to move to a more carefully planned response. So you need to think, what has to happen for you to delay your response, and to move from reactiveness and reaction to responsiveness and response. And what supports do you need to help you with this? We all need support at times in our parenting lives and our family lives. So when their storm meets our calm, it's more likely that they will be able to regulate with you. So this green solid triangle there represents the parent. So what I'm suggesting is you start from the bottom. You calm yourself so that your child can co-regulate with you, can also become calm. You connect with yourself and with what's going on for your young person. You know, you can empathize, you can nurture, you can try and understand, and then you have the conversation, and then you open the communication. Then you talk about, we've got a problem here, we can't go on like this, what are we going to do about it? But often we go straight for the conversation. I'm suggesting we start with the self-regulation, the calm self, whatever way you do it, and then you move to the co-regulation, and then to connect what's going on for them, what's going on for you, and then the conversation. And in that way, you're minding the relationship, you're repairing the relationship if it's been ruptured, and you're using your attunement to that child and reaching your own empathy and compassion as well. And it's difficult to do at heightened times, which is why it's helpful to think about this at times like this, when you're not in the middle of it all, middle of the storm, let's call it. So I just thought I'd throw this in because it's a really lovely illustration. So the jellyfish there represents the very emotionally involved parent, the kind of permissive parent, the sort of overprotective parent. The dolphin, well, let's go to the rhinoceros. So on the other side, on that other side where I showed you the picture earlier, we've got the demanding parent, or the rhinoceros. And the rhinoceros is sort of my way or the highway. They're quite emotionally dismissive at times. They're very authoritarian and very demanding. And then we've the dolphin, who's emotionally available but contained, assertive and supportive. Now, I can't see any of your hands, but if I said hands up, who's been in all those positions, possibly 10 times today, I'm guessing all of you will put your hands up. We all swing between one and the other many, many times, depending on the challenges to us. But what we're aiming for with the sleep and getting it right is to be in this dolphin position. We're aiming to be able to be emotionally available to what's going on, contained ourselves, so we're not reactive. We're not letting our worries about school, about tiredness, about when we see how tired our child is. We're not getting that, let that get in the way too much of our plan. So we're contained in ourselves. We're assertive and we're supportive. Okay, so that we're aiming for this middle position of support, which we'll call the dolphin in this picture. So your self-control will help things to de-escalate. Things will escalate in families, they always do. But what I'm saying to you is self-control means you stop, you think, and you think, what's my next move here? What could happen? Am I going to add fuel to the fire here? Or am I going to calm things so we can talk about it at a later time? So it's about standing back, pausing. Don't join as anything. You can add fuel to the fire if you join this young person in their upset, and quite often a parent shouts, child shouts, teen shouts louder, parent shouts louder, and you're on this sort of ping pong sort of pathway to nowhere really, except very loud, and everyone's getting distressed. So think of yourself as standing at the foot of an elevator. Your teen is traveling up on the escalator, shouting, giving out, distress, stop trying to control my life, or you're always giving out to me. And in that storm, you stay firmly on the ground floor, you lower your tone of voice and quietly say, I'm not going to fight with you about this. We can talk about it at another time. Okay? Just not going to fight with you about this. So that's de-escalation. That's not joining your young person in their emotional roller coaster or whatever's going on for them there. So it's a really helpful thing to try and do, is to stay on the ground floor. Don't join them on the escalator. Delay your response to a time when it's easier to talk about it, when people are a bit calmer. I'm not going to fight with you about this, but we need to try and figure out a way. I'm not going to give up on you either. Okay? But some parents will say, well, I'm in the basement, I'm gone. I just get out of there. So you have to think, well, what would help you to be on the ground floor and not on the basement, sort of avoiding all of it? Like, what would it be more helpful for you to also be on the ground floor? What can you do for you to be a calm presence in the face of this storm? Because it will help that young person to co-regulate if you're calm. Their regulation then will come down to your regulation, and they'll be allowed to do that. But I suppose if you're going to be a calm presence. You have to have enough distance not to aggravate and enough closeness to be with your teen so that they feel supported with their feelings and their emotions, which have got the better of them. What's going on for you? Must be really frustrating that you can't fall asleep. Very different stance, isn't it? So how can we talk so they will listen? Use the delay principle, reduce your stress and increase your planning. Focus on yourself, manage yourself. You want to deliver the message, we're going to try a different way. We don't want to fight with you over this anymore. And using your delay principle and pressing your pause button, deferring your response will help. That's you on the left, and will help your young person to co-regulate with you. They'll be looking to you for guidance. And if you don't go on the escalator, they're more likely to come down in time if you're not adding fuel to the fire. So this is actually a formula that I learned in training when I was learning about working with anxious young people and parents of anxious young people. And I thought it was a really helpful analogy. So what they're saying, this is a support statement. You acceptance and validation. I know this is really hard for you, and I know this is really frustrating for you that we're interfering with this. And then the confidence statement, and I know you can do this. I know we can change this. And that's support. So you're not just accepting and validating. You're not just saying, we have to change this. I know you can do it. You're saying, I know it's hard for you, and I know we can do it. So that's what they call a support statement. And they call it the mac and cheese approach because seemingly you can't have mac without cheese. So there you go. You've learned something else this evening. So it's really about, accepting that your child is frustrated and upset and worried and thinking, that they'll never be able to manage this, but also instilling in them the confidence that they can do it and we can do it together. We'll find a way. So the more regulated the nervous system, the more helpful we can be to others. So the more regulated your nervous system, the more you're looking after yourself, the more you're thinking, okay, when I come home from work, I need a cup of tea before I do anything, or I need to do something to calm myself before I go into the next part of my job, which is to help with the evening time, whether it's homework, dinner time, sports, what else would you have going on? Bedtimes. Like it's a very busy time in the evenings for parents when they might be feeling a little bit exhausted themselves. So you've got to think, how regulated is my nervous system for me to be able to help others regulate their nervous system? And your presence is an outcome of your well-being. So it really is important. If you're going to be able to calm down your response, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to figure out what has to happen for me to be able to be more available in this situation. So parental presence allows you the anchoring function of parenting. So when you're like an anchor, I really believe an anchored parent is an anchored child. So when you're more anchored in your feelings and your emotions and in your confidence, even in knowing what to do, the young person is going to experience more safety, more security, more connection and belonging to you. So if you really kind of feel that and get to a place where you can actually, how would you do it? Where you kind of feel, okay, I'm kind of ready for this now, but this has to happen for me to be able to do that. So then I think one of the ways, the simpler ways to do it is to use the evening times for a time of connection. Use the bedtimes to check in with them, get a wind down time going in your house, and sit with your young person. And even if it's not sitting with, even if they're up in the room, the place is calm, the house is calmer, there's no great demands, and just try and go with the flow of calmer night times in the house, as opposed to just focusing on bedtimes and sleep times, if that makes sense. So connection before correction. Your own nervous system has to be centered in order for you to connect with the child. And when you're able to do that, you can be more present, I suppose. And then the relational aspects, that means what you emit out, you will get back. So you're wired for connection and tuning into what's going on for your child. And it's called, I suppose, relational changes. Your relationship can really benefit from that. Okay. But look, I know it's very hard. I know your own windows of tolerance in the evenings. I don't know what it's like this evening. Maybe your day's been really difficult. Maybe you weren't, you don't feel prepared for tomorrow. And this all has to be minded in you. There's got to be acknowledgement that this is difficult for you as a parent as well, and I suppose how does your day prepare you for the job of supporting your child with their sleep habits? How can you be with them when they're not able to regulate their emotions? And quite often, unfortunately, at bedtimes, that's when all their emotions and their worries come out, because maybe they've had an argument in school, maybe somebody's given out to them, maybe somebody's been mean to them. Lots of things might have happened to them that you're then having to be available for them to be able to calm them before the bedtime happens. And I think this is really important, because I think if young people have a chance to process what went on in their day at an earlier evening time, they might be more likely to have it out of their minds at night, if that makes sense. They mightn't worry about it so much when they're in bed. Those negative feelings I was talking about, the spiraling sort of self-destructive thinking that might go on for them. So it's difficult for them to be reasonable and rational if they're feeling very overwhelmed. So how can you help them with this in the evenings? So connection before correction is kind of the message I'm trying to give. Connect with yourself first. And look, even though we know what works, getting kids to follow the tips is a tougher task, okay? So improving sleep patterns requires parents and children to work together. And here's a few extra tips I have here now for you. I'm not going to go into them all because I probably don't have time, but emphasize sleep, the importance of sleep, encourage the exercise, suggest replacing caffeine with non-caffeine drinks, try and get them into a good routine. It's very hard when we talk about electronic devices. The advice is that they're not on electronic devices before an hour or two before bedtime, but there's other ways of compromising. You could say, well, at least turn off your notifications, or at least put the phone away from the bed and use an alarm clock. There's ways you can have conversations about these things when you are connecting and feeling more tuned in to your child. Ideally, a bed should be associated with sleep. You'd try and discourage too much study on the bed, or, because it doesn't become really a place just for sleep. And really encourage you to think about a pre-bedtime routine, a relaxing, winding down routine, checking in. You could even introduce a supper time or a chat or whatever. I'm going to fly through that because you can get it when you get the slides. Have a sleep chat with your child, say, look, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you not getting enough sleep, and see how it goes. Because often teens get used to a chronic tiredness, and they don't really have the insight or the motivation to change their behavior when it comes to sleep quite often, because they don't really notice it so much. And there's lots of rules and tips around that. Maybe you could look them up rather than go through them here, like trying to finish their schoolwork before they go on their social screen activity. Try to introduce non-screen based activity in the evening, even for half an hour, whether it's a family situation or for them, trying to encourage non-screen based activities late at night. Ideally, you'd have devices in the common areas rather than in their bedtimes. I know that's quite difficult for most parents to implement strategies like that, but it's about discussion and communication and compromise, I think, at this stage, and giving the advice. The bedroom environment is really important, neutral colors, rather than bright colors. White noise can help, maybe having a zone for all their TV, gaming devices, tablets, a zone that's away from the bed. Obviously, a dark bedroom helps the melatonin, blackout blinds. But again, talk with them, see what's going to work, and think about the right conditions. Comfort's really important. A comfortable bed and bedding is actually very important in terms of the sleep environment. The reality is, this is what we're looking at for most of our kids. But really, what do you need to focus on? Pick your battles, give things that matter less the green light. It's not important. It's not as important as the issue at hand. Worry and quarrels over bedtimes. You're trying to cut down on all of that. So don't you know, I would suggest you don't give out about the messy bedroom as well while you're trying to focus on sleep. I defer that conversation to another time. Let some things go. Because these are all very effective de-escalating techniques and more connecting techniques. So again, that's a funny poster. You could stick it up somewhere. Your battery's depleted, your battery's full, you know, those kind of conversations. And then that's a lovely piece there. You can again get it in the sleep hub. So winding down and get ready for bed. These are my top tips. Self-control. I'm just checking the time. Oh, it's time. Self-control. Manage your own anxieties and frustrations. Calm yourself. Then connect. Then have the conversation. Validate the challenges for your young person. Recognize this will take time to change. Pattern and sleep habits take time to change. Come back by half an hour, then another half an hour. Don't go for the big change all of a sudden. And support sleep hygiene by example. Tease out the barriers. Connection before correction is my takeaway message, and get help if you need to. So that's really the last slide that I have for you. And I'm sorry that if I went over time, but I hope you got something out of it.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Madeleine, for all that. God, there was so much information there. Really lots to take away, and I really hope that everybody here watching this evening has taken something away. I love that picture at the very end of the bedroom, bringing me back a few years, what my bedroom was like. And it's realistic and it's very real. In relation to that, a few things jumped out just there from what you were saying, Madeleine, in relation to the pause and the connect as a parent. And you mentioned there it is when it comes to that time of night, parents are tired, they've had long days, you're working out of the home, you're working in the home, and it's to recognize that and put, having that pause button, and then connecting when you're in a space that you're able to manage your emotions and be emotionally available to your young person that way. I also loved the mac and cheese, was really good as well. So really good ways to relate, I think, for parents to be able to adapt the different strategies when you're looking at sleep and the sleep patterns at home, and some great top tips at the end. So there's huge, oh my God, there's a huge amount there. So thank you so much. We have a few questions that have popped in, and we're going to go to them in a couple of minutes, and we will put them to yourself, Madeleine. But firstly, I just want to remind people, just before we finish up and go into the questions and answer section, of the different supports that are there for parents, having listened there this evening. If you feel like you want some more further support in that, we do have our support line, which is open Monday to Friday from 9 to 1, and you can contact us on 01 522 4300, and that's where you get to speak to some of our therapeutic workers if you want to chat further about sleep or any issue that you might want to chat about. You can also email us on our parenting support at ispcc.ie email address. And then we also have our Ask Robin service, which is an anonymous service where you can just pop a question in relation to parenting, and we will get back to you. And if you'd like to read some articles that we have up on our Parenting Hub, you can go onto our parentinghub.ie, and when we do look at the back of our articles and what's seen, the most viewed article on our Parenting Hub is the one in relation to sleep. So it is such a big issue for teenagers today, and that parents are experiencing. And then we have our digital mental health and wellbeing programs. So they are a space from anxiety, which is for young people. So it's for parents and carers who are looking to support their young child or teen around anxiety. There's programs there. And if you go on to our space from anxiety at ispcc.ie, you get more information there. And lastly, just a reminder, and this one is for the young people, is our Tozy app. And this app is aimed at creating a safer and more positive space for young people online. So I'm going to pop into the Q&A and have a look at the questions that are there. So bear with me because there's a few coming up and popping up. Firstly, just to go back and I know you asked the question at the beginning, Madeleine, what was Netflix biggest
Anyone get it?
Did
anyone
we
get
did.
it?
We had one or two that got it, and they got it right. It was sleep. So well done to all those that got it.
Well done.
Yeah, there's this one is more of a comment, so I just want to note it, and then I can say the questions. Just someone popped in that needing to get up at 6:30 for HCETSS start time. It's so to get 10 hours sleep is hard. So recognizing, yeah, it is when there's lots happening. It's quite difficult. So just going through the questions, Madeleine. Just the first one there, in relation to it is, are there certain foods that help with sleep?
Interesting question. And I suppose when I was thinking of supper time, I was thinking somebody might ask that question. So I suppose really, use your intuition. I suppose comfort foods really, and easy to digest foods are what I'd be thinking, like a creamy porridge or banana or warm milk, obviously something that's a comfort food and that's also not going to sit heavily on the stomach, and obviously you try and keep it, a bit away from the bedtime, but it's more to have it as part of the ritual as well. Even if it's not about the food, it's about the sitting down and the chat, and supper time denoting everything closing, the kitchen closing, if you like, after that. So I suppose crunchy foods are actually quite alerting and focusing. So there are different foods that might help, and really your teen could probably lead you in that. They'll probably know what makes them sleepy and what actually doesn't go down so well and keeps them alert. So I'd be thinking more creamy porridge or banana or warm milk, or I'm sure there's teen equivalents that are much nicer than those, but that's the same idea, a sort of a noodles or whatever they have in the evenings now.
Okay, great.
Good
I suppose,
question.
and like you said, it's introducing it as part of the routine, isn't it? That
Yeah.
supper, that kind of a certain time before bedtime.
Yeah.
Great. We have a few more. Any advice for how to respond to the child's anxiety before bed? The what did I say? Why did I say that? And that was what you were talking about when you did the circles there, Madeleine. And how to reduce this.
Yeah. So one of the best ways I think to manage the before bedtime anxiety is to bring it back as far as you can in that window between coming home and bedtime, to make a space to talk about it. So, is there anything how did your school go? Try and help them process the day a bit. So with the younger children, often their worries come out when the parent is putting them to bed. So even in that case, you'd be saying to a parent, if the worry isn't going away from talking about it, you need to put a limit on the worry talk. You need to say, I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Now let's imagine, something nice, and you go asleep. I'm going to take the worry out of the room. But with a teen, you can't do that. That's a younger child. So with a teen, you'd be trying to get them to sit down with you, distract them into watching something, or try and get them to talk about anything that might have happened that day so they can process it earlier, rather than processing it in the middle of the night when they're worrying about things and ruminating. So try a few things. If you have if you're able to have that conversation with your child throughout the day from when they come home to the evening, it's just to be all ears, really. I'm thinking, listen, and then listen some more in those hours, and it might come out in a natural way, or they might make comments and you'll be able to validate them. And that might help cut down on the sleep and ruminating. If it's really bad and they're really not sleeping at night, you need to go and get it checked, talk to your GP about it and see, is it a bigger problem that needs, more expert advice. But allowing someone to process the day can be really, really helpful to set up the night for a better sleep and better things to be dreaming about, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it's that connection piece, as you said, throughout the day with the parents when you can, but can be difficult with teens. And just a reminder maybe for that parent as well, around our space for anxiety is for young people aged 15 plus who might be suffering from anxiety, but there's also parental programs there that can be, parents can get involved in as well, just as a supportive piece. And it looks at tools and tips and strategies as well. Great, Madeleine. Another one that's come in there is, what time should children at 12 years old go to bed at?
Oh gosh, work your way back to the 10 hours. That's a really, that's a very direct question. They say if bedtimes are becoming very tricky and the child just isn't tired, you might experiment with going to bed a bit later, so that they're more tired and ready for bed. So you've got to figure it out with your child, But if they're very tired in the mornings, they're falling asleep in class and you're feeling judged by the teacher because they keep telling you they're yawning there through the day, then obviously they're not getting enough sleep in the night time. So figure it out yourself in terms of how tired they are in the mornings and how tired they are during the day. That's probably a better, if their concentration is really impacted in school, and if the teacher's saying, look, he seems really tired, then you could try an earlier bedtime routine, connecting all the time, and then when sleep, even if they went to rest in bed and settled themselves with a bit of music or reading or something, it'd still be better even if they're not asleep, once they're relaxed and you have the routine in place. I think it's not to make bed a punishment is one of the things not to fall into, sending people to their room. It gives it a bad spin. So, you make it a really nice thing to do. You have a nice bedroom, you've got lovely lights, you can read your book. So figure it out yourself and you'll see then when they're actually falling asleep, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So it's a lot of trial and error, isn't it? It's trying it
Yeah.
as well, what works and
Yeah.
seeing what's works for your teen and your young person.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all the questions
Okay.
that have come in. Just a comment there, just in relation to the recording. A recording will be made available in the coming weeks on the ISPCC platforms. And again, we've reach out to us at any of the contacts that we've shared with you this evening as well.
Siobhan, there's a
Just,
couple more
yeah,
in
just
there.
seeing they're coming in there. Yeah, sorry. Here's another one. Do you think
Mhm.
8 a.m. is very early for school to start?
Ask any teenager and they'll say definitely yes, 8 a.m. is too early to start. But unfortunately, there's a whole system that has to change around that. So yeah, that's what you're up against. You're up against the early starts. But if your child's motivated and on board and wants to be in there with the rest of them, then try and work out the rest and nap, the rest times and the bed times to be they'll probably be ready for bed if they have a very late. I'm guessing they have to be up at 7 then, or 6:30 maybe to get to a school. So, while it's early, yeah, it is an adjustment for a teen. They're not used to. They're naturally not built for early mornings. But as I said earlier, if you get into a routine that takes into account that they have a 7 a.m. start, then the evening times can become more wind down and happen earlier for them. Even as I said, if they're resting in bed, sleep might come, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this is another similar one. What is the recommended bedtime for 14-year-olds, and what's the recommended duration? And I think that's like what you were saying there, Madeleine, in relation to their ability and how tired they are, and kind of adjusting that within the family environment.
Yeah, and recommendations are recommendations. You don't want to be fighting with your child over this. But I suppose the research is also saying hardly anybody is getting the recommended sleep. Those that are definitely performing in a better way in their daytime. They're definitely more able for stuff. But with a 14-year-old, it's so tricky. Maybe you can sort of agree a bedtime schedule for term times or from Sunday to Thursday or something and work on them that way. And because if you keep going on about sleep and having fights about it, it's just going to come a point of conflict that they'll probably stick their heels in against. So it is that matter of working it out with them, making bedtimes more pleasant. Even if it's watching something with them before they go up and a more relaxed sort of exit, if you like, or end to the day. I mean, I think if you work back your 10 hours, you've got your ideal bedtime for a 14-year-old. So that'll be your bar, but it'll probably be 2 hours later, I'm guessing, realistically, that you'll get them to bed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm.
Another one there, Madeleine. Our 15-year-old suffers from chronic fatigue and can sleep up to 15 hours a day regularly, missing lots of school due to this, but also missing out on fun things. We had his bloods checked and he had a physical checkup at his GP, all was normal. He has no access to his phone and internet at night. Would you recommend a service for further testing or investigating this problem?
I mean, that's hard. For him, and he's obviously sleeping, and you've had the bloods done, so there's not necessarily a physical cause that's found. I think, I'd certainly bring him to the GP and see how he's doing, see if there's any anxiety that needs to be teased out, or if there's, any other thing that a GP might feel a referral is necessary, to a referral on to another service. So yeah, I think if I was that worried, and it sounds like you are, I'd bring him to the GP and just have a sort of a checkup on him that's less physical and more around anxiety and how he's doing. And if he's missing things he wants to go to, that is a concern, you know. But yeah, I'd go to a GP and get some advice from them.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And the last one, I think, if I'm not missing one's coming in, is my 13-year-old struggles to sleep without me sitting on the edge of the bed. Should I expect her to grow out of it or try harder to help her sleep on her own? She enjoys the connection before sleep.
Okay. So lovely on one level and difficult to sustain on the other. So if I suppose ideally you'd want your 13-year-old at some point to be able to settle herself to sleep. I don't know if it's a girl or a boy, but if they want to settle, you want the skill they need to learn is to settle themselves to sleep, so that you can be sort of coming in and checking or slowly, you know, backing out, if you like, of the room. So if you can, I wouldn't pull away immediately. I try and set it up that you're saying, look, I'm going to come back and check you in 3 minutes, or I'm going to come back and check you in 5 minutes. And you do check. You don't wait for them to come and check you. You really get a strategic plan in place and work your way backwards out of the room, as I said. And it's just comfort, it's habit, it's the pattern. So if you really are committed to changing the pattern, and maybe she or he might be too, because they might want to go on a sleepover or something and be afraid to do that. So it's worth working on, but do it gently, do it in a backwards way, working from, you know, staying to going out for 5 minutes, or saying I'm going to be on the landing. You know, do it in a gentle way, I think, like you would a younger kid. But the mac and cheese is really important. I know you can do this.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to give them that understanding that this won't be like this forever. I know you can do this, and you did it in Granny's when you stayed with her, so you can definitely do it here with us. So a gentle but firm approach is very important, and that she has ways to settle herself to sleep, whether it's listening to a calm app or reading or doodling. You know, think of a nice way for her to end her day in her own bed as well. That's what I'd be thinking.
Okay, and if you said they're slow steps, Madeleine, exactly, taking it
You're trying to reverse a pattern, you know.
Yeah, and having that connection piece, can still have that before the bedtime. They can do something nice together, or
absolutely
have
start
that routine
earlier. Definitely.
So they still have that time together and everything.
Yeah.
That's all the questions that we have. So I'd like to say a big thank you, Madeleine. It was fantastic having you here this evening. And I'd also like to say thank you to everybody who have joined us here this evening as well. And I wish you a good evening. Take care all. Thank you.
My
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Thank you all for listening.
Bye-bye.